Hi, I'm Leanne Ely. I'm a nutritionist, a New York Times best-selling author, and some people even say I'm a life coach. I started the Daily Dish Show to share my story, my truth, and my journey to vibrancy, and to inspire others to do the same. Because it's all about grit, perseverance, and finding a way despite the odds. It's about embracing the whole woman, not just the parts that are easy to love, and feeding her heart, mind, body, and soul. But I found that this isn't just my story, it's your story too. It's go time. This is the Daily Dish. We have been talking all week long about overthinking. Anyone ever do it? And yesterday, we went through, we've been just talking about things, and there's been a lot of aha moments. Like, we think we have no control over thoughts, and we find out that we do. Our thoughts get away from us all the time. And John Acuff, who wrote the book Soundtracks, calls our constant overthinking a soundtrack in our mind, because you know why? It's constantly playing. There's millions of miles of our thoughts. Millions of miles of our thoughts. And the problem that we have with all of that is that sometimes we're overthinking things. Sometimes we're taking too long on things. It's just, it can be a complete disaster in there. My mind is, I'm constantly looking for squirrels because I'm ADD. And it just gets a little bit, gets a little bit wackadoodle in there. So there are ways of getting rid of this habit of overthinking, and I want to talk about a little bit of those today. And we're also going to be talking about, how we talked about yesterday that we're magnets for bad information, and that we have this confirmation bias and all of that. It's part of our overthinking, by the way. It's part of the pattern. But it's also our minds listen to what we say. So if we are saying, if we're saying something that is completely out of line, with what it is that we want, it doesn't matter, because our brain is going to go into that place of saying, hey, you know what? I'm going to follow you. I'm going to follow those words that you say, because that's exactly how your brain works. That's exactly how your brain works. Your brain says, you want that? Okay, let's do it. Isn't it a bummer? Oh my goodness. It's just it's crazy town. So Tony Robbins has a great quote on this whole thing. Hey, Angie. Whatever you hold in your mind on a consistent basis is exactly what you'll experience in life. Whatever you hold in your mind on a consistent basis is exactly what you'll experience in life. It's just like the old Henry Ford quote, which is, if you think you can, you will. If you think you can't, you won't. You'll get that. You'll get that also. I'm not saying it right, but I'm paraphrasing it. But you get the idea. That's because of the reticular activating system. And when we understand how our brains work, when we understand the delightfulness of our hippocampus and how it holds the memories that we've had for so long, and we understand our prefrontal cortex is the place that we do our abstract thinking, and we understand that our amygdala is wanting to hold us hostage, because our amygdala hates change. Our amygdala, poor amygdala. She's just so scared all the time. She's a hand wringer, that one, just like my mama. So we've got to get out of this habit, though, of overthinking. And there are things that we can do, and there are things and practical things that we can bring to the table. But you know what it is? It's thinking about your thinking. That's a good thing to do, but it's only an analysis tool. In other words, it's not going to get you out of overthinking. It's just merely going to bring to mind, hey, you're overthinking. What's going on here? What's going on with your overthinking? That's not going to stop anything magically, but it will make you aware, which is step one, of course. And remember that while it's not providing the solutions, it is providing the processing, but that doesn't get you to the end. It just merely provides, so this is what's going on. So there's several things that you can get that's going on that that'll really super help. And one of the things that you can do is act as if. Remember, we had this whole discussion a few times about not faking it till you make it, because that's phony and fakery. We don't want to be that. We want to see it until we want to be it until we see it. In other words, we're called. And I take a further level up on this whole thing. And I say, listen, if we have been called to such a time as this, right? If we have, then what does that mean? What does that mean? It means that we're called on purpose and for purpose. So what does that mean? That means that we are to be the person we've been called to be. Even if we don't look the part, it doesn't stop us from being called to be it. You got me? That's how this whole thing works out. It makes such a difference. It makes such a difference. All right. Now, the other thing you got to do, and this is critical, is replace thoughts as they become apparent. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? And the fact is, they will become apparent if you've already started just committing yourself to thinking about your thinking. If you've decided to deploy that tool, then you will get to this place of understanding, I have to replace that thought. That's just not working anymore. It's not serving me. A really good thought that I can use over and over again is, if you're one of these people who just say, no matter what I do, I just can't lose weight. Your brain is going to say, gotcha, and make sure that your body chemistry is so screwed up that your little can't lose weight for anything, your little dream that you don't want is a nightmare, comes true. That's what happens. That's why I say this is why we have to understand what our brain does. This is why we have to get in line with it. Because when we do, that means that we have tools to kind of disassemble some of this garbage. Because we don't want that, right? We don't want that. So we have to replace those thoughts as they become apparent, and they'll start to stick out like a sore thumb, and we'll say, you know what, that just doesn't work. And that's simply because you've become aware. Otherwise, it was just going by like nobody's business. No big deal. There you go, Lucy. I'm steadily losing weight. One of the things that I used to say way back when I was losing all that weight was, I'm losing double the weight in half the time. Just that simple. And just putting my body on notice that that we're not messing around. Look, I'm doing my part now. It's time for you to do your part. I also do in my meditation, I meditate with my thyroid and let my thyroid know it's perfectly fine to operate optimally. My whole body. I do the whole thing. Like, slow down the aging stuff. Let's boost up the health. And as I take my supplements at night, I have several supplements that I take at night. I know what they're doing for me. And I just said, go to work, do your thing. I love that. I love that. We can do these things at any time. We can say these things at any time, and we can plant seeds in our brains to cultivate this type of thinking. That kind of thinking is way different than overthinking, isn't it? It's a new way of thinking. It's a new pathway. It's a new start to perhaps better, more serving thoughts, and to get you out of this overthinking zone and get to a place where you're actually performing, if you will, and doing the things that you want to do. It is that simple. And one of the other things that I love to do is to look at quotes that motivate, that help. Because when you get wrapped up, a lot of times we don't even know it's our overthinking that's doing all of that. And yeah, it is. That's what it is. But when we're in that place, if we look at quotes, it'll really help us to refocus and recalibrate. Do you remember, what was the name of that thing? Garmin. It was a Garmin. You remember the old GPS thingies that you'd put on your dashboard, plug into the cigarette holder? I don't think they make those anymore because, we all have them on our phones now and everything. But I remember I was in Ireland at the time, actually. And I remember driving in, these endless roundabouts and keep missing the turn. And it kept saying, recalculating. And that's exactly what happens with a GPS. When we disrupt something, it has to reassess the situation and reconfigure which exit you're going to take. It's the same thing with our thinking. When we give when we put a disruptor in there, we have to recalculate and think about something different. So A really good example for me, I'm going to share with you one of my most favorite quotes. And I've probably said it a million times, but it's a Robin Sharma quote. And whatever you focus on grows, whatever you think about expands, whatever you dwell upon becomes your destiny. And I had this as a huge big post-it because you can buy those huge, humongous post-its. Have you seen them? Like they're huge. They're massive. They're like 3 feet tall, and I mean they're just really cool. So I had it on my office wall for a period of about a year because I was living in just abject fear. I'm going to lose my business. I'm not going to be able to continue this. It's not gonna keep happening. And I had to keep rethinking, recalibrating what my thought process was going to be. That's exactly what I needed to do, is to recalibrate and recalculate exactly what it was, and kept my focus off of the disaster scenario and put it onto what can I do? What where should I go with all of this? This was, like I said, it was a few years ago. And I started thinking about all the actions that I did to make sure that my mind was on that quote. And by the way, we have quote decks, and these quote decks we prepared. We have like 3 different ones, and we put them together with quotes that shook or stirred the pot or went ooh when you read them, because they're the same caliber of quote as this Robin Sharma quote that's going to help you recalibrate so you can get back on track. Overthinking, what does overthinking do? It robs you of the present of your life. Overthinking catastrophizes your future. Overthinking puts you into the past. And so we have a real problem there, don't we, when we're living in the world of overthinking. And a lot of us have a soundtrack in the back of our minds. It's not just a little earworm, it's just a constant barrage of stuff that we just really don't want to be listening to, but it's in our heads. So I put together 7 things that you can do. These are action things that you can do. You might want to write them down to make this soundtrack in your head a whole lot more positive, help you turn down the volume a little bit on some of this stuff, and just make it so that you're at least aware of what's going on and that you can start to see things stick out so you can pluck them out and plant something new in there. That's great. Lizzie says she's got all 3 quote decks and uses them every day. Well, Lizzie, me too. I can't help myself. I love my quote decks. There's so many good things in there, and sometimes you just shuffle them up. And as a matter of fact, I took them off. Took everything off my desk last night because I was cleaning it up, and it's over there. But otherwise, I'd show you my quote deck for today. So here are those 7 things that we want to talk about. The first one is to stop the perfectionism, because we think, this perfectionism is the thing that gets in the way, doesn't it? Perfectionism is the thing that stops and says, no, 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 no. You can't do that because you can't get it all done, or we don't understand that we can break things down into smaller steps or into smaller projects even, or whatever it is that we're trying to do. And instead we decide and make this decision using faulty thinking from somebody else. This is what our mother used to say. If you can't do it right, don't do it at all. I remember my mother saying that, This is when she was teaching me to wax a floor, y'all. Back in the day, we had a floor waxer. I remember this thing. It was kind of a turquoise color, heavy, heavy machine. And it had these 2 pads on the bottom that she would put floor wax on and go up and down that linoleum. So she was teaching me how to do that. Can you believe that? Floor waxing. Who floor waxes? I used to also, does this make me feel old? Yes, it does. Does this make me look old? That's all I care about, right? But I used to iron my dad's boxer shorts. I used to get paid to iron clothing. I think I got a dime a shirt, and my dad had a big old 17.5-inch neck. I remember thinking, who has a neck this big? Ironing all these huge shirts. That was my dad for you. He was kind of stocky, had big shoulders and big neck and what have you. But I had to iron stuff like that, But who says things like that? If you can't do it right, don't do it at all. I say get it done. get it done, and then go back and fix anything that needs fixing, and just get rid of the perfectionism, because perfectionism says don't do anything. It really does. Perfectionism is paralysis. It really is. Analysis paralysis, all this other stuff. Wait till I get it right. I'll start on Monday. Oh, January 1st is a good day. All of this garbage. But that's what perfectionism does. It keeps us out of the running. It keeps us out of the running toward the goals that we really want. Number 2 is right size, don't catastrophize. Listen, you have problems, right? Anyone problemless? Anyone? No one. We all have something going on in our lives, don't we? But that does not have to stop you from figuring out what's going on. Just because you have a problem doesn't mean that your life is flawed and ruined. It just means you're normal and you're a human being. So right size that problem. Don't catastrophize it. In other words, look at it and say, okay, so here's what's going on. This is what I need to do for this particular situation. Not, oh my gosh, calling everybody, telling them all about it, posting about it on Facebook. I'm not kidding you. I saw a woman post on Facebook this whole thing about her husband and her breakup and what a jerk he was. That's not the word she used, by the way. Was not the word. And went through this whole thing and tagging him and tagging this other woman he's supposedly having an affair with. What a trash heap that was. It was like the worst, dirtiest, filthiest, gossip thing I've ever seen in my life. And of course, I unfriended her because I don't want that garbage in my news feed. But when you catastrophize, there could be a catastrophic situation here where her husband is doing all of this. Who's to say that that's true or not? I don't even know this woman, really. I know her through other people. Obviously, this is how we became friends on Facebook. But airing your dirty laundry like that, inappropriate, for heaven's sakes. Who do we want this? Who wants to hear about this? I don't. Keep it to your closest friends and family, I guess. But at the same time, and we'll get into this, talking about it endlessly only makes it come to life. We give it life every time we speak about it, every time we bring it up. And there's always, we always have to sort things out, don't we? And we need to go to professionals to help us to figure out certain things sometimes. I'm not saying that that's an inappropriate thing at all. I'm just saying that when we talk about something endlessly, when we catastrophize, when we hand wring and worry ourselves sick, and when we make a mountain out of a molehill, remember we did a whole week about that? Well, what does that do? It brings us to the place of overthinking. It brings us to the place of not getting resolution and solution, just more of the same. And all their little friends come to visit, right? Ugh, what a mess. Number 3 is your intuition is something that can help guide you. Now, understand about your intuition. I know a lot of people who think, oh, my intuition's never wrong. Well, that's basically like saying I'm pretty much perfect. Let's say this. Your intuition is usually right. Let's go with that. It's usually right, but it's a start. And it can be reliable, especially if you're having just a real gut feeling like, just something weird going on here. And, you got to listen to that. You got to see, is it checking out? If so, your intuition might help you with this idea. Instead of overthinking things, you can say, my intuition, my gut's kind of telling me to do this. And then maybe just kind of put a toe in and see how it works. Number 4, decision fatigue's got to go. And this is the way it goes. You go all in with something instead of just half-assing it. Because when we half-ass something, then we're back and forth on the fence, off the fence, on this side, on that side. So just think about, have you seen a 3-year-old on one of those little kiddie slides? Just going up and down and up and down and up and down, and you just get exhausted watching them. That's your brain. When your brain is not 100% committed to one thing or 100% committed to another thing, and it's sort of wobbling both times. I just see this little cartoon of this person climbing a fence, sitting on the fence, getting down on the other side, staying there for a minute, then getting back up onto the fence, sitting on that fence and getting down the other side, just like a 3-year-old going up and down on that slide. It's exhausting just to watch. Think about what your brain's going through. Your brain is just going, blah, I'm tired. And decision fatigue ends up, you're not making the best possible decision. You're making the last exhausted decision. So think about that. Number 5 is to manage your story. Does your story empower you, or does your story hold you back? Now, this is an important thing because, and I know a woman who had, she's a motivational speaker, and boy, what a rotten childhood she had. I mean, rotten. And she tells her story simply because that story has a purpose. And her story doesn't rock her world like it used to. It actually empowers her because she gets to tell the after story about when she started to realize this, when she started to connect the dots. Now this is her life, and this is what it is. And this is the possibilities that she wants you to be looking at. But for the rest of us people who are not on great big stages telling our stories and empowering women to thousands and thousands of women, we have to ask ourselves, is my story helpful here? Is it empowering me and others who are listening to this? Is there a purpose for this retelling of my story? Or is it holding me back? Is it just, throwing me down into this spiral, for several days after I tell it? Think about that, because that's really an important thing. And where do we want to live too? Past, present, or future? Up to you. Number 6 is to manage your identification as well. We've talked about this for a long time. But, I remember when my mother came to live with me in 2015. This is right when, she was quite sick. And I guess it was 2014, actually. It was 2014 she came to live with me. And she had been quite sick and what have you. And finally we get her, out of the hospital and made the decision to move her to North Carolina and have her move in with me and all of that. And I just remember her saying to me, well, she would just get so intense about stuff. And what I noticed is as her illness progressed, she became super intense and just all the time. And I told you she was a hand wringer. And I remember she saying when I said to her, Mom, you got to calm down. This is just making things worse. And she said, oh, well, I'm just a worrier by nature. Well, I objected to that then, and I'll object to that now. Don't identify yourself with something that's going to trip you up and hold you back. I told you about this woman who had a big butterfly tattooed right here on her wrist, and she had it tattooed on her wrist and it had said Hashimoto's survivor or something like that. And to me that was just that was like, wow, that's when you ink yourself up with something and identify with a disease, boy, you're really going the extra mile to make sure that, you're going to rock your health. You really are. And I look at those kind of things. I want to identify with the things that are empowering, not the things that are disempowering. I want to leave my past in the past. So, for all of you who are breast cancer survivors and all of that and what have you, if you want to go around wearing pink ribbons and calling yourself a survivor, fine. But in my estimation, what would be more empowering is to say beyond survival and into thriving. Beyond surviving and into thriving is the whole thing. Be beyond it, be past it, be over it, and be building up your health, because that is way more empowering than identifying with all this, stuff. That's how I look at it. That's how I see it, because I understand what it is like to survive something, but I also know what it's like to go past that and to thrive after something. That is incredibly empowering. So your identification is absolutely crucial. What do you identify with? Well, for me, I identify with empowerment. I identify with this idea that there is so much out there. I identify with the fact that life is always working out on my behalf. I identify with all the things that I want, and the things that I don't want, well, I'm just not available for those things. Yeah. It's just, these are the things that we need to do in order to move past all of this stuff. And what happens when you're all wrapped up in this old identity of being just a survivor? There's way more to you than just that. So think about that before you go into that. Number 7, ask good questions and make good statements about yourself. Not why. So in other words, don't ask, why do I overthink so much? Don't ask yourself that. Just one of the things that you want to do is say this instead. Why am I so good at thinking great thoughts? Because when you start saying this, why am I so good at, or why am I so, whatever you want in your life. Why am I so good at losing weight? Why am I so good at sprinting? Why am I so good at having a great relationship? Where you see the weaknesses in your life and you start to put out these ideas of what it is that you want. And when you ask it in a question, your brain has to search out for the answer. So what do you think your reticular activating system's doing now? It's going to look for evidence to support that statement, that question that you just asked. Why am I so blank? I love that so much. I love that so very much because it talks to the subconscious. And your subconscious is the one that needs to switch things out. And it's really hard to get into the subconscious. We don't know what our subconscious is doing, but we do know that we can touch our subconscious and get our subconscious to work with our reticular activating system to start bringing in evidence to support these things that we're thinking about. So let's make sure that the things that we're thinking about aren't overthinking, aren't in the place of putting us into a little teensy-weensy identification, that aren't in the place where we're just brushing off our intuition and that we're getting all wrapped up in our old perfectionistic tendencies, and that we're not catastrophizing over our problems. But instead, we're looking at them, we're right-sizing them, and we're saying, you know what? I can do this. I can do all kinds of things. Watch me. Watch me get this done. And I just want you to remember something, that what you focus on grows. What you think about expands. And what you dwell upon, that is going to become your destiny. So getting out of this overthinking habit is absolutely crucial. And I think I just gave you 7 solid steps to do so. What do you think? Helpful? I hope so. Yes, how can I is a good one. That's a really good one too, Jane. I like it. All right. Well, thank you so much. Hello, Judith. I identify as being a woman who's got past everything that's happened to her and starting a new day, a brand new day. I love that so much. Very good. Anyway, I'm so glad you showed up today. I hope Wise Women's Wednesday helped you with a couple of ahas, something to take away and to really plug into your life and make it that much better. Peace be with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining me today. You can find me on TikTok for daily tips to help support your most vibrant life. And remember, you are the author of your own story. Until next time.